our nation's earliest days, religion has been the heartbeat of American life. Before there was a government, there were churches. Before there were social programs, there were believers living out their faith, teaching the young, healing the sick, and caring for the poor. Today on Faith and Freedom 250, we look at what happens when government begins to replace the church.
Religion played a crucial role in the foundation and development of American society. Many of the institutions we rely on today, schools, hospitals, and charities, they can trace their roots directly back to churches and faith communities. Our founders understood the power of religion in public life. That's why they protected it in the very First Amendment. George Washington himself even weighed in on the importance of religion in his last formal address to the nation, when he wrote, "Religion and morality are indispensable supports for democracy." Early Americans looked to their churches, not to the state, for moral guidance.
But over time, that began to change. Starting in the late 19th century and accelerating through the 1960s and 70s, secular and government institutions began to take the place of religious ones. It's a shift that raises an important question. What happens to a society when government replaces the church?
For centuries, religious groups were the ones creating schools, colleges, orphanages, hospitals, and charities, long before the government ever stepped in. They followed the example of Christ and his disciples, living out their faith through mercy and service. They were moved by the messages from their ministers and demonstrated the philosophy of better persuasion than compulsion by answering the call to volunteer rather than fulfilling a requirement levied by the government.
French writer Alexis de Tocqueville saw this spirit firsthand during his travels in America in the 1830s. He wrote, "Americans of all ages, all conditions, all minds constantly unite to give fetes, to fund seminaries, to build inns, to raise churches, to distribute books, to send missionaries. They create hospitals, prisons, and schools." He went on to observe that when government entered these arenas, it would lessen the freedom and the industry that democracy required to flourish.
The founders shared that same conviction. They never intended for government to do everything. Before the Constitution, much of the debate centered on how to limit government power, not expand it. They had just fought a revolution against a distant monarch and a government that did not represent them. Americans were very comfortable with a small federal government, strong states, and vibrant local communities, many of them led by the church.
That model worked until the 20th century. During the Great Depression, sweeping reforms like the New Deal created federal agencies to handle almost every social issue. For many Americans, it felt like the government had taken charge and taken over. That pattern only deepened in the decades that followed.
The dangers of that shift aren't just political, they're spiritual. The dangers may not have been initially evident as government agencies were created to solve very real problems in our nation's history, but the effect of this overreach is clearly illustrated when studied across the history of socialist and other authoritarian regimes. When the national government becomes the primary provider, local churches and volunteers lose impact. The call to personally serve others begins to fade. People start to see the state, not themselves, as responsible for helping those in need, and over time, dependency grows and personal duty weakens.
History shows that as dependence on the government grows, the fabric of society is weakened. Culturally, people begin to identify with a central government and a system, while ties with a religion or doctrine become weaker. The moral foundation of a church can be replaced by the practical necessities of society. For many believers, this may lead to the serious issue of the government taking the place of God as the ultimate provider in their lives. The government may not share the same moral foundation that a church does, and as has been witnessed in other systems, eventually decisions are made for the good of the system, not its people. Such decision-making leads to dependency on the state for everything.
When that happens, aid and assistance become entitlements, something distributed by a bureaucracy based on statistics and tables rather than on compassion. True charity and care for neighbors begins to fade. Help is granted or withheld with little concern for the individual. In the United States, government was never meant to function this way. The national government was designed to address issues that local and state governments could not: defense, currency, and international relations, not to replace religion. The First Amendment makes this clear. Religion was so important that it was protected from the very beginning. Our founders knew that the faith of citizens could provide the moral guidance society needed to thrive.
From the very beginning, our founders made it clear government exists to protect liberty, not to replace faith. They believed our moral compass must come from God, not policy. And they understood that the spiritual hope of the people was far too sacred to entrust to the state.
Our founders understood a simple truth. Government can secure liberty, but only faith can secure souls. That's as true today as it was 250 years ago. You've been watching Faith and Freedom 250, a special series from the Herzog Foundation celebrating the Christian foundations of America's story. Join us next time as we explore more of the ideas that shaped our great nation.